There are a lot of different types of pawns in chess. Doubled pawns, isolated pawns, backward pawns, connected pawns, pawn chains. But in my opinion, one of the most dangerous and most influential types of pawns is the passed pawn. A passed pawn, as a reminder, means that no pawns of the opponents can stop it or capture it on the way to becoming a queen. So this D pawn here is considered a passed pawn. And the reason that passed pawns are so dangerous is because, of course, if the pawn gets to the edge of the board, you get a queen back. So the opponent cannot allow that to happen. They have to either blockade the pawn or capture the pawn, or they're probably just going to lose. And you get these very interesting situations because of that. So in the game that you're about to see, I'm going to show you how white created this passed pawn in the first place. But more importantly, we're going to look at what happens from here and how they use this to their advantage and eventually win the game. This is going to be a very instructive game. It actually comes from the book, The Most Instructive Games of Chess Ever Played by Irving Chernev. It's not the logical chess book, but one of his books. Fantastic game, and we're going to just jump right in. So here we go. E4, C5. We come out of a Sicilian where both players decide to fianchetto their bishops. And we're going to get past the opening moves. Now, rook to b8 is played here, primarily to get off of the diagonal of the bishop, and also sets up b5, which is a very nice plan for black, right? Pushing this pawn forward, you can kick the knight around, gain some control over the dark squares. Pretty nice move by black. White castles, and then plays f4, starting an attack on the king side, maybe, if you can push this forward, depending on what black is going to do. Black pushes forward, white jumps in with the knight, and white now has a plan, okay? And white's plan is very simple. They would like to play c3 and d4, because if you can get these two moves in, you now have a really nice big center. You're kind of limiting what the bishop is able to do, and it's going to be tricky for black to figure out how to proceed. So black says, I don't think I want to allow that. Let me play knight to d4. Now I have a question for you. How does this move prevent c3? What do you guys think? How does this stop white's plan of c3? Well, the answer is if white plays c3 now, black can simply take here, and after you recapture, they kick your knight away, so you're no longer defending here, and then they're just going to win a pawn. Takes, takes, takes. Black's pretty happy with that position, right? So that's the idea, okay? And that's essentially black's threat that prevents c3. So white says, all right, I guess I have to take that knight. There's a check, so they step to the side. And now I want you to pay attention to this bishop on d4, because this bishop on d4 is kind of a problem for white. And if they can't play c3 to chase it away, it's just kind of controlling the entire board here, right? So that's what the next several moves kind of revolve around. White is trying to play the move c3. The problem is it's black's turn. And black says, I'm not going to let you do that, because obviously it's defended twice right now. So black says, okay, let me play e6 and chase the knight away. Okay, so after knight to e3, knight to e7, you can see the problem. You can't play c3 or black just simply wins a pawn. Okay, so here's a good moment to pause, think about the position, and think about what move can white play, because white's position is kind of a bit cramped, right? You don't really want to move your bishop. You lose a pawn. You've got the pressure here. We've already talked about this annoying bishop. What move do you think white played? If you had a chance to look at that, the move that they played is a3. Now, this is a very weird looking move because, well, for two reasons. Number one, you're moving a pawn on the side of the board when you haven't finished developing. It seems like you should try to figure out a way to develop. But also, aren't you just like losing a pawn? Because white can't capture this way or you lose the rook. So you've got to recapture with the rook, and then it looks like there's two attackers and only one defender. What is white doing? The answer is they're setting a very clever trap, and it goes like this. Takes, 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 and the move is queen to a1, and look at black's rooks. Both rooks are on the diagonal, and both rooks are undefended. And the only way black can save the rook is with queen to b6, but then you walk into knight to c4, which is a very nasty fork, and black's actually just losing a full rook. Okay? So very, very clever trap from white there. And not only does it have that clever little tactic, it's actually just threatening to take here and open up the rook, Or if black takes and doesn't fall for the trap and does, let's just say, castling, well, now they've cleared away the B pawn, and guess what white's going to do? C3. You could also take a free pawn over here, but even if, let's just say, black defended that, you would still play C3. You've successfully chased the bishop away, and then you can play D4 like you want, and you get this nice big center, and white's pretty happy. Okay, so very clever move there to kind of sort of untangle from the tough position that white was in. Okay, so A3. So black sees what's going on and says, you know what? I'm just going to castle. Let me just leave that alone. I don't want to mess with that. So they castle. The white recaptures, and they still can't play C3, but at least they now have the rook lined up on the pawn, even though it's temporarily defended. At least there's some counterplay here for white. Okay, so white plays queen to E1, and again, they're threatening the same thing. They want to play C3 and D4. So what do you think black does? Queen to C7. They say, no, I don't think I'm going to let you do that. I'm going to stop that. And now white plays a very interesting move, knight to C4. Now, at first glance, okay, you're blocking off the queen, and guess what? Threatening C3. So we keep seeing this dance of back and forth, back and forth. Can white get C3? Black says, no, you can't. They keep trying. So again, black says, well, I don't want to let that happen. Let me play D5, chase the knight away, and once it moves back, I've essentially got a free move, and I've, again, stopped C3, because now I have the 3 pieces there again. However, white plays a surprising move in this position. What do you think they played? You had a chance to look at that. It's bishop to E3, ignoring the threat on the knight. Now, why are they ignoring the threat on the knight? Because if black takes that, guess what? Now you take the bishop, which is undefended, and you've got some serious weaknesses here that you're going to be able to take advantage of, because black has no bishop to defend those, right? As an example, you play knight C6, trying to attack and also defend the weakness over here. There was also a threat there. White can simply play bishop to F6, and I think like G4, Queen H4, probably black's going to get checkmated, or if not, it's going to be a super uncomfortable position. Okay, so that's kind of the idea there. If you don't take the knight and you instead try to just move your bishop back, well then white simply comes in, because now you've got the attack there, so that doesn't really make sense. And if you try to just defend with the knight, then white's going to simply take here and win a pawn this way. So what does that mean? Well, it only leaves black really with one option, to actually just take the bishop. And now white recaptures. And finally, they've gotten rid of that annoying bishop on D4. And that leaves some weaknesses that black has to be careful of, right? Whenever you fianchetto the bishop here, if it gets traded off, those dark squares in front of the king are weak, okay? And white, after these next couple of moves, tries to take advantage of that. So if you would like to pause, how do you think white tries to take advantage of these dark squares? Well, the answer is they play the move G4. And their plan is simple. They'd like to play G5 next move. Let's just say white does some random move. They'd like to play G5. And then, let's say black does some random move, knight to G4. And the knight's jumping in. And it's very, very difficult for black to stop that, because these squares are just so weak. Okay, so that's kind of the plan. But white says, or sorry, black says, no thanks, I don't want any part of that. And they play F5. Because now, if you try to do the same thing, you can't go there, right? The square is taken away. Your knight has no way to infiltrate those squares. Okay, so that's black's idea. However, after takes, they don't really want to take back this way and open up the G file where the king is. So they take back with this. But now, do you see an opportunity for white to potentially create a passed pawn? That's right. It's not that difficult. You jump the knight in, and you have the fork here. And when black recaptures, you now have the passed d pawn. Okay, so this is the position that I mentioned at the start of the video, where white has the passed pawn, and black has to constantly deal with that. Now, one of the best strategies against a passed pawn is to blockade it, because if it can't move, what's it going to do? It's just going to sit there. And if you blockade it, once it can't move, then you can try to attack it and eventually take it, and you solve your problem. So that is what black is trying to do. So they play the move rook to b6. They have 3 pieces preventing the pawn from moving, which is a lot. Okay. Queen to e5, and white is, very happy if black's going to trade, because now you have 2 connected pawns, which is much more dangerous. So, of course, black doesn't want to do that. and they simply bring the rook over. Okay, so they've blockaded the pawn, putting pressure. It's defended nicely by the bishop, but if black at some point can attack it, they might be able to capture this guy. Okay? Now, this is kind of a somewhat of a critical moment in the position because white has to figure out how to make progress. And there's a very nice move here that white plays. What do you think they played? You had a chance to look at that. The move is actually c4. And what white is trying to do is get two pawns, two connected pawns. They couldn't get it this way because black didn't take the queen. But they're basically saying, look, if you en passant me, I'm going to recapture, and now I have two connected pass pawns, which is even more dangerous because now they can support each other and chase the rook away, and it's hard to blockade them. But you might be saying, okay, but what if the queen just takes the pawn? That seems like a free pawn, right? What should white play in this position? Well, there's a couple of good moves, but probably the simplest and easiest is just grab the pawn here because it's no longer defended because the queen moved. You're threatening checkmate on g7. So when black tries to stop that, you can simply trade rooks and then play d6, and you open up the d5 square, which is a killer because you've got not only a fork, but even if the queen like saves itself by moving somewhere, you also have check followed by checkmate. And so it's just a bad situation for black. There's not really anything they can do at this point. So that's the problem if they take the pawn. Okay? And then we already saw if the en passant, which is what was played in the game, you get the connected pass pawn. So white recognized the opportunity using a tactic to get the connected pass pawns. Okay, very, very nice move at a critical moment in the game. Okay? So black plays queen c5, and the strategy is kind of the same. You still want to blockade the pawns, even though there's two of them. You blockade them, you stop them from moving, you try to put pressure and eventually, hopefully, take them. That's what black is doing. And they're doing a nice job, right? Look at the pawns. They're not really, it's not easy to move them forward. Okay, so c4 is played, and black plays bishop to a6. Now, another question, why didn't black take the pawn? Well, it's the same thing as before, right? It's basically the same situation where white can jump in, you threaten the checkmate, and it's the same kind of things that we saw. Okay, so nothing really changed. That's why white can safely put the pawn there. So bishop to a6, and black is hoping to take it with the bishop, leaving the queen defending the pawn on a7. And again, we see this same kind of critical moment, this situation in the game where, okay, black has done a good job defending. They've blockaded your pawns. What do? What do you guys think white played here? Well, the answer is with a sacrifice. Rook takes a6. Now, they're giving up the exchange, the rook for the bishop, but why? What are they getting in return for this? Well, it's not easy to see, actually. And that's why it's such a brilliant move, because the follow-up here is, I think a lot of people would miss this. Okay, so if you want to pause again, there's a nice move right here for white. The move is d6. d6. Now, this looks like an absurd move because it looks like, well, first of all, the pawn could be captured here and also here. Like, both of the pawns are undefended. What's going on? Well, this one's easy. This one's easy, right? We've got a fork, okay? So black doesn't want to take that one. But what if they take this one? That just seems like a free pawn, right? What's going to happen here? Well, watch this. Bishop to d5 check again. King has to move. Queen invades. King moves. Queen goes check and checkmate. Okay? And it's not, even if one of the rooks captured, it's still not a good situation for, well, the rooks can't because the queen, yeah, that's what I was going to say. Okay, so either way you look at it, it's basically the pawns are invincible. Okay, the pawns are invincible, even though they're not really defended enough, right? Tactically, they're defended. So that's what was so brilliant about the sacrifice. You get rid of the bishop, but you clear the way for the pawn to move forward. Okay, there was the blockade, but you temporarily clear the way, and then using tactics, you push the pawn, right? You push the pawn, d6. Okay, so let's keep going. Black says, well, I can't take that, and I can't take that, and I'm probably about to get checkmated once the bishop comes in, because it's just too powerful. Bishop and queen like this on an open king, you're not going to survive. So the only thing that black can do is trade queens. But you guys can see the problem with that, right? Now, white has 3 connected passed pawns. it's going to be very difficult for the rooks to stop them. However, black does a pretty nice job. Rook to a5, and look at this. Attacking here, stopping this guy, and this one's stopped by the rook. And oh, by the way, if you move this, you lose this one. So it's kind of like they're all blockaded somehow, right? Look at that, look at that. This is attacked. I mean, black's doing a good job. But wait for it. Bishop to d5 check. Saves this pawn. Defends this guy. Okay. King moves. And now how do you proceed here as white? You got a chance to look at that. Hopefully you recognize that the pawns are stuck, right? You don't want to do this and just lose this guy. You don't want to do this and just lose this guy. And you don't want to do this and just lose this guy. So what do you do when you're stuck and you can't make progress? You bring in more troops. You bring in more pieces. Like, how about rook to b1? You're going to infiltrate, and you're going to cause problems for the black king. Remember, if you can get your rook on the 7th rank and cut off your opponent's king, that's extremely dangerous. Opens up all kinds of tactics. You also have some targets there, some pawns that you could potentially munch on. The rook to b1 is a great way to bring in the other piece. Okay? So watch what happens. King g7, black says, no thanks. I don't want to get stuck on the 7th rank. I'm going to make a run for it and get out of here. So they do that. And now white plays king g2. They don't want any problems with their king getting stuck in the corner. And remember, at the end of the game, the king is a valuable piece. You have to use it. Okay, so that's what white's doing here. We get some checks. Black's trying to do something. f4, they figure at least, let me push my pass pawn, right? And see if I can cause some problems for white. But white handles it very nicely. King to d2, rook to e3, rook to e7, defending the pawn that was attacked. Okay, rook to b8. And black is trying to come down here. And if you get both rooks in the pawn going, this could get dangerous for the white king. So what do you think white played here? The move is bishop to b7, using that bishop to cut off the rook from invading. Okay, and if you notice, there's no other open files for the rook to use, right? There's a pawn here, there's a pawn here, and here, and here, and here, and here. They're all blocked off. So this was the only way that the rook could invade, and white just stopped that, right? Very nice move. So black plays a5, again, trying to use the other pass pawn to create some problems. But white simply plays d7. And I'd like to ask you, what's the threat here from white at this point? Well, the threat is, at some point, white's going to play rook here, right? And, like, for example, if black just pushes this, you're going to play rook e8, and now you have a tough decision, because if you take, they get a queen. If you move away, they get a queen. If you stay there, they just take you. Okay, so however you look at it, it's not really good, although Stockfish actually finds something here that kind of blew my mind when I saw it. So it looks like it's totally winning for white. Stockfish finds a way that black can save the game. If you guys want to pause, what do you think it is? Well, if you had a chance to look at that, this is what Stockfish finds. Rook takes bishop. Allow the queen. Jump down here with check. King to d1 or c1, let's just say. And then you just take the pawn. And apparently this position is a draw. Somehow, even though you have the queen here with white, it's a draw. There's a checkmate threat. Okay, that's the first thing. If you stop that by moving your king, you actually lose the game because rook f3, and I don't even know why. So the only move for white is queen to d1. And then a3. And basically the rooks, along with the passed pawns, are so powerful that now it's even changing. It's changing from a draw to black's winning even as I'm looking at this. It's incredible. So there was that going on. Okay, some crazy Stockfish stuff. However, from a normal human looking at the game, it looks like you're about to lose the game if you allow this move. So that's why black said, no, I don't want to allow that. Let me play rook to b3. Okay, and the idea is that if you go there now, they're simply going to take here and deal with the problem. Yes, you can get the queen, but then they can sacrifice. We end up with this rook ending, which who knows what's happening here. Okay, but that's black's idea. So rook to b3. All right, sorry for that rabbit trail there, but Stockfish is kind of crazy. Back to the game. Bishop to c6. Gets away from the rooks. And again, kind of wants to do the same thing. Bring the rook down, get a queen, maybe force black to sacrifice a rook for the pawn. Check. King goes here. Check. King escapes. Notice he's using the pawn as potential shield, so you can't check here. If you check here, I'm going to run. And that's actually what happens in the game. Black plays f3, and white basically says, nope, I'm going to stop that. So rook to f7. After f2, there's a nice continuation here. What do you think white played? All right, well, if you had a chance to look at that, this is very common when you get these passed pawns that are really, really far advanced. Because when they're only one square away from becoming a queen, the opponent has to stay guarding them. Otherwise, they just a queen. So what does that mean? It means this rook is overloaded. This is called an overload tactic, where the rook is doing too many things. It's protecting the pawn. It's also stopping the queen. So white simply played rook takes f2, because if you take, they're going to get the queen. Now that's what black decided to do, because otherwise, if you don't take it and you just move here, I think what white was going to do was probably just block off the rook like this and still cause the problem. And then this guy was coming later, and it was just going to be hopeless anyway. So black decided, you know what? Let me take this. Let me give him the queen and see if I can hold on with my rooks. But it doesn't really work out. King to d6, rook to d3 check, bishop to d5, a4, e6. Just showing you how this one finished out. Queen to d4 check. And how does white finish off the game here? Well, they simply sacrifice the queen for the two rooks, and they go into the winning endgame because the bishop stops this guy, and there's just two pawns that you can't stop. Okay? So here's the key takeaway, guys. Here's the key takeaway. When you have a passed pawn going all the way back to, let's say, this, which position? Right here. When you have a passed pawn like this, it's incredibly dangerous, and your opponent has to use pieces to guard it, right? Like, look at this position. Black's got like all three pieces kind of tied up. It's trying to stop this pawn, right? So it's very, very dangerous. But once they blockade it, you have to keep figuring out ways to improve and increase the pressure. And that's not always easy to do. Usually there's some clever tactics or tricks that you need to employ to make that happen. Like we saw here, the c4 move to get the two pawns connected, right? And then again, we saw the brilliant sacrifice with the follow-up here, right? This is hard stuff to see. But if you don't see this, you're going to have a hard time breaking through. And again, it was the tactics that made this possible, right? So, and once you do that, then it's just a question of like, okay, how do you use those to your advantage to win? And again, it's not always easy to do, but that's the idea. Okay? Passed pawns, extremely dangerous. I think they're the most dangerous type of pawn in chess. So I hope this helped you guys, and I'll see you next time. Stay sharp, play smart, take care.